Where do you get the bandwidth in a company to monitor all the tweets and Facebook comments? Do you outsource that, or do you hire a resource that does nothing but looks around and tries to find those opportunities to communicate?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So what a lot of companies do is in the short term, they might outsource it because they don't have the bandwidth or the expertise. But then they really take the majority of it in-house and in-house quickly because it is your core. It's the core. It's your customer and your client, so you want to own that core competency. And so then over time, you probably only outsource the real technology pieces that have to be built out. What you want to do then over time is if you hired an agency, you might want to look to where they've got talent or somewhere else and hire 1 or 2 digital natives that really understand this. And then from there, they can easily train the rest of the company. Because a lot of this, as you probably noticed, is common sense and stuff that we've used throughout our lives and how to build relationships. It's just a little different way from the digital standpoint. And then when you're ever faced with, wow, we don't really have the bandwidth to do this stuff, when you think about it, that's really saying we don't have the bandwidth to listen to our customer. And you never would say that. So what a lot of companies do is once they realize that, they look at what everyone's doing within the company and go, okay, nothing's more important than listening to the customer, so what do we need to move off of some of these people's plate to make sure that we're able to do that? And then real quick, too, is to know that, kind of like to use cliches, don't boil the ocean, take the elephant one bite at a time, is that really just focus on 1 or 2 social media aspects that you think you can have success in, and then slowly grow from there. And let's say that you've got 10 opportunities. It might be that you start off with 2 and you only really get to 5 because of this. You could bandwidth. You could never get to all 10. That's okay as long as you're showing that return across the board. And hopefully someday you get to those 10. But from a personal standpoint, I can't get there either. I have bandwidth issues too. So I mainly use YouTube and Twitter, where I know that if I use Google Plus and Facebook, those would also have a great return. But because of bandwidth issues, I can't use those as much as I'd like.
Good morning. Thank you, by the way, for the presentation. Victor Antonio with Exedian. I want to frame this question. You'll get no argument from me when it's B2C on social media. You'll get no argument from me when it's B2B. You can make the argument there. So let me frame it in this context. When you have B to, if I can create my own acronym, B to complex B, which is a complex sale, I don't see the value with Facebook. I don't see the value with Twitter. I do see it with LinkedIn because you can see the connections there. But I've also noticed that, let's look at YouTube now, second largest search engine. When I did searches on who was actually going online for looking for information in our market niche, there wasn't a lot of views. So the question, wrap it up, if the decision makers are not going to these, let's use those 4 columns, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, if the decision makers are not going there, with the exception of LinkedIn, on these 3, are they still useful for companies like ourselves that sell a complex product?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And again, what I talked about in terms of complexity is actually a good thing in terms of this space. If you can figure it out, then you're going to be light years ahead of people you're competing against. But what you want to look at is, again, it could be a scale of 1 to 10. It'll never be 0. So there'll always be a play. And depending on the vertical, it could be a 2. So if you're selling stealth bombers, it might be a 2 because that's complex. But your play might be that people post on blogs that we shouldn't buy as a government stealth bombers, that's a bad purchase. And then you as a company could get in there and go, well, actually, it is a good purchase because it saves money, it actually saves lives, blah, blah, blah. I'm not an expert on stealth bombers, but that's just a quick example as I think out loud here. But the other piece, too, is to look at from the complexity standpoint is figure out, okay, maybe Twitter and Facebook aren't it. You say LinkedIn's good. Is it try to figure out, okay, what do other people wrestle with that are in my space to where I can connect? So instead of on a sale right away, it could be we're all concerned about social good. We all want to give back. So why don't I connect with them that way? Whether it's I'm going to start providing videos and information about how companies can be more socially good. If we find out that that's what people search on within Google, then all of a sudden your company shows up high in the search rankings because you've got these videos that are 1 to 2 minutes in length. Average person drops off after 45 seconds on a 60-second YouTube commercial, so keep them short. But all of a sudden you show up high talking about social good, and then you connect that way through the complex business, and you have that relationship, and then you can sell to them. Because the beautiful thing about a complex business where you don't have a lot of clients is it's almost easier than a B2C company because they wrestle with B2C. They've got millions of stuff flowing in, and they can't handle it. Whereas on the B2C, the complex B2B side, is that all of a sudden these relationships are even that more important. So if you can use anything at your disposal to help augment your offline relationship, it doesn't replace it, it just augments it, then you'll be a step ahead. So there's just different ways you can start to think differently to kind of make that connection happen.
Hi, John Canis with Aaron Fox, Washington, D.C. We're in a heavily regulated industry, and a lot of what we do is affected by a number of federal government agencies, a lot of state government agencies. Are there any social networking tools that are particularly effective in following developments or maybe even affecting developments by regulators?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We've seen some success like the pharma industry and other highly regulated industry to whether it's either individually someone moves forward and kind of goes with the ask forgiveness, not permission standpoint. Because what we've seen, I'm not going to profess to be a lawyer. That'd make me look stupid really quickly up here. But what we've seen is there's been forgiveness from the standpoint of in the courts of law, because the technology, the lawyers can't keep up with the technology. So as long as you're doing what appears to be the best step for the customer, they've been very lenient in the courts because there's no law around it. So that's one thing, is if you're always doing what's best for the customer, you're in a good place to be. The second piece is don't idly sit back, because again, this stuff hasn't been written, and you guys know this better than I do in terms of all the constituents you need to work with in Washington, is proactively help them out, because they're looking for help, because they're probably not experts in technology, where you guys actually sit at the forefront of it. You could actually actively then say, here's what we've seen, we've come together. That's what's a great thing about a place like COMPTEL, is we've pooled these resources. Here's what we think it should be, and this is what's in the best interest for the people. And so that way you can proactively take those steps. And in terms of tools, again, I don't know the space as intimately as you, but I mean, look out there and see if there's blogs. I listen to podcasts on technology, and you'd be amazed at how often they talk about the T-Mobile, AT&T merger and stuff like that. And they are adamantly opposed to that merger happening on these tech blog podcasts. And so it's a way that all of a sudden you can reach out, and they love it. These people that run those podcasts are like, wow, we've got inside information from people that also agree with us that this shouldn't happen. So let's start a movement, and then all of a sudden you get the people on your side, and then that helps as well create that inertia. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do, but again, it's going to take a lot of digging into and rolling up the sleeves. Thank you. Thanks a lot.